You can follow him on Twitter at Neil W. McCabe 2. Neil McCabe, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, great to be with you, Grace. Let's get after it.
Thank you for quoting my favorite Chris Cuomo. Let's get after it, Neil. I want to start with James O'Keefe. You mentioned today on your Twitter, or maybe it was yesterday, I think you put this really well. You said James O'Keefe is infrastructure, and I couldn't put it any better myself.
Yeah.
Let's break this down for people. First, let's go over the story from CNN, because there was a lot of different stories. There was a lot of different elements to this. There was this guy, Charlie Chester. He went on a few dates with a girl. He did not realize that she was working for Project Veritas. She recorded him admitting that CNN is fake news, which we all know. But still, it was pretty jarring to hear some of the stuff he said. And then take us from there. What has happened in the last 24 hours?
Well, of course, what's interesting about what Project Veritas does is it gets people, it exposes the private truth that's hidden by the public lie. And if there's any one constant in James O'Keefe's journalism going back, say, 15 years, it's that he's exposing the private lie, the private truth that's hidden by the public lie. And the public lie is that CNN is a news organization. And the truth is, it's a political organization that is tied to the left, and it will exploit and manipulate and do whatever it can to push its agenda, its political agenda, which is tied to the left. Now, since then, of course, Twitter has said, we're not going to allow James O'Keefe to be on Twitter anymore, which is absolutely absurd. They said that they accused him of running fake accounts, which, why would you run a fake account if you've got 1 million Twitter followers? It's insane, but there it is. And it's like you appeal. Well, what's the appeal? You're going to go to the Jack Dorsey court. And so what we're seeing now is once again that the left has now taken over the media to the point where they don't even pretend anymore. And if you start running up the score against the left, they will just deplatform you, and that's what they've done to James.
And one thing I noticed, Neil, about Twitter, and I know you're on there a lot too, it's hard enough to get a negative story trending about, let's say, CNN or MSNBC, just because of the way their algorithm seems to be set up. They're constantly pumping stories that they want to trend. So if it's a negative story about Matt Gaetz, it will be trending. They don't tell you how many necessarily tweets are actually going on about it, but they'll put it on the list. They'll give you a little information about why it's trending. So the fact that James O'Keefe was still able to make news from this account and get people to see these videos, he already was going against the grain there. That was already hard enough. And so he must have really been scaring them if they felt that they had to take him off the platform completely.
Completely. And we've seen Project Veritas videos where they've literally taken retweets off his numbers. Like they'll actually go backwards as he releases a viral video. But one of the things that James talks about all the time, and in fact he wrote a book about it called Breakthrough, and that's Breakthrough, and that's when you have a story that is so solid and so damaging to the left or any institution that it breaks through your own sort of, every media organization, every media person has their own sort of echo chamber. Mm-hmm. But when you break through to the mainstream media so that the New York Times cannot ignore it, so that CNN cannot ignore it, so that papers in London can't ignore it. And that's what happened with the CNN story. Maybe the biggest story he ever did with Project Veritas is when they recorded the woman from ABC talking about how ABC spiked her Jeffrey Epstein story. And that was all over the world. You just couldn't ignore it. And so faced with this CNN story, especially going after, Matt Gaetz, just as they're lining up Matt Gaetz for his public hanging, CNN is exposed saying, yeah, it's all propaganda. We have to take down Gaetz because he's too good. It's just the world we live in. And if you had suggested this 3 years ago, 4 years ago, you'd be called some crazy kook, like a conspiracy theorist. but it's just now it is a reality that conservatives have to face with.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I'm speaking with Neil McCabe from the Tennessee Star. Neil, speaking of propaganda, now they have no problem suspending people or, deleting people's accounts who run real news, who run real damaging news about corruption. I know Project Veritas did a lot of things on the border. They got a lot of photos out of the, I know we can't say kids in cages anymore. I will say migrant children in overflow facilities. And they had no problem kind of hiding and burying those stories. And then when you look at a story like the Russian bounty story, that was everywhere. I actually want to play for you a cut, Neil, and I want to get your reaction. This is an old cut. Let's do cut 12, please, Jared.
Despite those denials over and over, sources tell CNN that last week the U.S. even shared that intelligence with British officials, as some of the British troops would have been targeted as well.
Yeah, to say nothing of putting bounties on American troops.
It's unbelievable, Joy.
Yeah.
Public reporting that Russia had bounties on the heads of American soldiers. And you know what a bounty is? It's somebody puts a price on your head and they will pay it if you are killed.
Now, Neil, I know Trump's never going to get an apology. He doesn't expect an apology from any of these people. But there has to be some sort of consequence for politicians and media outlets just running with complete bogus stories.
Right. So I expect the New York Times to run bogus stories, right? No one from the New York Times who collected a Pulitzer Prize for reporting on the Russian collusion hoax ever gave their Pulitzer back. So they're tainted, they're burnt, they're useless. The Washington Post, of course, hyped this thing. Voice of America hyped this thing. Forbes, everyone jumped on. But the person I hold really personally responsible is Congresswoman Liz Cheney from Wyoming, who is the number 3 Republican in the House Republican leadership. She held a press conference back in June, and she kept throwing logs onto the fire, but she knew it was bogus then because she always hedged it with, quote, if the reporting is true. And it's like, so she knew that it was bogus, but she just kept hyping it, and yet she's still there. And she, of course, she's guilty of a ton of other sins. But the bounty story was bogus. It was knocked down immediately by the White House. The White House held briefings with people telling him it was bogus, and yet they kept reporting it. And now finally we find out that it was basically a detainee who thought if he told them a story that he could get better treatment, and that's basically what we have. And of course, let's not forget that President Trump and his military was directly responsible for killing more Russians than any other president ever, because U.S. troops went after Russian mercenaries in Syria. So if this guy is in league with the Russians, why is he killing more Russians than any other president who has ever been in the White House?
Right. Well, that's trying to break down the liberal logic where all roads lead to Putin, and none of it makes any sense. You actually have to bend your mind into a pretzel to try to understand. It's like Trump being
listen, Grace.
Yes.
I wish Putin had run the midterms for the Republicans, because then they would have held the House and won the Senate,
Well, right. And it's like anything else they accuse Trump of. None of it really makes any sense. I mean, he's racist, but black people had the lowest unemployment when he was president. He's anti-Semitic, but his daughter's Jewish and his son-in-law's Jewish and his grandkids are Jewish. I mean, none of it really makes sense, but it makes sense to them because he's evil. And so everything kind of makes sense in that way. Now, speaking of Russia, I want to get your take here on Biden and how he's doing. I don't even know how many days we're into this. It feels like 1,000 days, but it's not. I want to get your take on how he's doing so far. And I think the perfect segue for that, Neil, is to talk a little bit about Putin, or should I say, Clutin. This is cut 1.
I think that the problem is that the Democrats and the left and their pals in the media have wanted to beat the drums. For some reason, they are obsessed with having a war with Russia. And we saw that in, why is it normal that, when Barack Obama didn't tell the incoming Trump administration that he was going to dump a bunch of sanctions on Russia less than a month before he leaves office, right? So here we are back again. Biden and his team said that they were going to send 2 warships into the Black Sea to confront the Russians because they are lining up for an invasion of Ukraine. And Biden flinched. He didn't send the ships in, and now the Black Sea is closed. And so basically all of this talk has worked out to nothing. And so I would say it's pretty clear that if the Russians do roll into Ukraine, we are going to watch it happen. And it's going to be brutal. And I'm sorry for the people of the Ukraine who are going to, who are relying on the promises of Biden. But I think everyone now understands that whatever you might have thought of Donald Trump personally, no one wanted to go to war against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And it looks like people all over the world can't wait for the chance to go to war against Biden.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, and I've been reading a lot about that today because, I don't pretend to be some sort of military mastermind, but I remember when Trump...
Oh, yes, you are great. Don't sell yourself short.
Maybe I am. Who knows? I got a lot of talents here. But I remember, Neil...
You're a military mastermind. Go ahead, please.
I remember when Trump dropped the first Moab, I called my mom, and, I was... I was nervous. I didn't know. It was fairly early on in his presidency. And I said, Mom, what's stopping another country from dropping one of those on us? And my mom said, before Trump did that, nothing. Now they might think twice about it. Because he did have this unpredictability where you didn't know what he was going to do. And he wouldn't pick fights for no reason. And he wouldn't say things when he had the opportunity to say, oh yeah, we're doing well with them, everything's going well. He would say that. The only time he would really start to, use tough rhetoric was when he thought it was necessary. But Joe Biden's kind of the opposite. He has no problem saying that President Putin is, has no soul. And then when it actually push comes to shove, you know what? A great expression I saw, Neil, was Victor Davis Hanson. He said, in contrast, Biden often talks provocatively while carrying a twig. They say, speak softly, carry a big stick. He's the opposite.
Yeah, and I think just to pivot back into domestic politics, for 4 years we saw that Trump personally was not popular. And all the polls would say, his approval rating was always low. But people overwhelmingly agreed with his policies.
Right.
And you're seeing this great, Biden has these phenomenal approval ratings, but if you ask issue by issue, especially with the border, they are so getting crushed. They had to fire their border czar, and they might have to fire more cabinet people. In fact, it's like Biden is now going to start rebuilding Trump's wall. That tells you that their internal numbers are absolutely tragic right now. And, it's the sad part is that we have to wait 3.5 years for Trump to come back.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm on the same page, Neil. Neil, where can people follow you on Twitter and read all of your great work?
Please go to the Tennessee Star, which is the flagship of the constellation we call the Star News Network, and also go to Neil W. McCabe 2 on the Twitter.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Neil McCabe. Now, I have to let people know about a little secret here. Since I was in my early 20s, I have struggled a bit with acid reflux. If you don't know what that is, you're very lucky. This is when you eat ice cream, you drink coffee, and you just get this horrible kind of burn in your throat. It's very hard to sleep when you have it. And I was never going to give up anything I loved. I was never going to give up coffee or soda or ice cream or salsa or any of those things. So I needed to find a fix, and everything I found was short-term. Nothing worked long-term until I tried Balance 7. It's my one-stop shopping to help increase my energy levels, aid in digestion, heartburn, and so much more. Check out balance7.com and learn why balancing your body is so important for the performance of your immune system. Simply drink a total of just 3 ounces a day, and within 72 hours, most people begin to have more energy, greater clarity of thought, and just feel healthier overall. I kind of felt it before the 72 hours. For me, it was pretty instant just because it really does help with the acid reflux. But for other people, 72 hours. Order your 1-month supply at balance7.com. Use code word GRACEFREE. It's all one word, GRACEFREE, to save $10 off your first order and get free shipping. Also, if you're one of the first 50 to purchase Balance 7, you'll receive Smooth Skin, an exfoliant and deep cleansing skin conditioner, valued at $13.99, but you will get it for free. So to go over all of that again, there's a lot here. It's Balance 7. You order now. You receive $10 off your first order of a 30-day supply. You get free shipping and a chance to receive Smooth Skin. That's a lot of good stuff. So make sure you go to balance7.com. Use code word GRACEFREE. We'll be back on the other side. We'll take some of your calls, 844-500-4242. This is The Grace Curley Show.
The Grace Curley Show will be right back.
This hour of The Grace